My name is Margaret Peterson, 67 years old, and nothing prepared me for the moment I heard those words. I had returned early from my cruise, dragging my suitcase up the walkway when laughter spilled through the open windows. Then I froze. Finally. She's gone. We're free now. Rebecca's voice rang out, followed by my son Thomas's enthusiastic agreement. The champagne glasses clinked as music blared. I stood paralyzed at my own doorstep, hand trembling over the knob, wondering if I should confront them or simply disappear. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience and standing up for yourself, subscribe to the channel. Now, let me tell you how my own child plotted behind my back. 5 years ago, my husband Frank passed away after 42 years of marriage. The grief consumed me as I rattled around our 2-story colonial home where we'd raised our children and celebrated countless milestones. Our mortgage had been paid off years earlier, and I thought selling would give me the fresh start I needed. That's when Thomas and Rebecca suggested I move in with them. "Mom, it makes perfect sense," Thomas had said, his arm around my shoulder. "You shouldn't be alone, and we'd love having you close to the grandkids." Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, you could help us with the mortgage, and we'd save you from all those maintenance costs and property taxes." It seemed like the perfect solution. I sold my home for $375,000 and contributed $50,000 toward their mortgage as agreed. The rest went into my retirement accounts and savings. I converted their finished basement into a comfortable living space, complete with a small kitchenette and sitting area. I would have privacy, but be close enough to see my grandchildren, Lily and Jacob, every day. For the first year, things went smoothly. I watched the kids after school while Thomas and Rebecca worked. I cooked family dinners 3 times a week. I even paid for groceries regularly as my contribution to household expenses. But gradually, the atmosphere changed. Rebecca's comments grew increasingly pointed. "Margaret, we appreciate your help, but the children prefer their sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. Or that's not how we discipline in this family." When I gently corrected Jacob for throwing toys. Small criticisms delivered with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Thomas, who had always been my confidant, slowly distanced himself. Our Sunday morning coffee chats dwindled away. When I brought up concerns about Rebecca's changing attitude, he dismissed them. "Mom, she's just stressed about work. Don't take everything so personally." By the 3rd year, I felt like an unwelcome houseguest. Family decisions were made without my input. Holidays were planned around Rebecca's family preferences. My suggestions were politely acknowledged, then ignored. I retreated further into my basement apartment, emerging only for grandchild time and occasional meals. The cruise was my attempt to give everyone space. I spent $3,200 from my savings on a 2-week Caribbean getaway, but severe seasickness forced me to return after just 3 days. I didn't call to announce my early return, thinking I'd surprise them. What a surprise indeed. That night, after overhearing their celebration of my absence, I couldn't bring myself to knock on the door. I silently retreated to my car and drove to the Hampton Inn 10 miles away. Sitting on the sterile hotel bed, I sobbed until my chest ached. The people I loved most in the world, the ones I'd given up my home for, were celebrating being free of me. The next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, I checked my online banking accounts to assess my situation. I needed to know where I stood financially if I had to find a new place to live. That's when I noticed the discrepancies. Over the past year, there had been multiple transfers from my savings account to an account I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, gradually increasing to $1,000 withdrawals. In total, nearly $15,000 had disappeared. The transfer authorizations appeared to have my signature, but I had never approved them. The account they went to had Thomas's name as the receiving party. My son had been stealing from me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. The cruel words I'd overheard were bad enough, but this calculated theft from his own mother left me breathless with shock. Not only was I unwanted, but I was being systematically robbed by my own child. The ground beneath my feet seemed to dissolve as I realized I didn't know my son anymore. They did what? Diane Stevenson nearly spilled her coffee across the booth at our favorite diner. My best friend of 30 years stared at me, mouth agape. Threw a party because I was gone, I repeated, twisting my napkin. I heard them through the window. Rebecca's exact words were, "Finally, she's gone. We're free now," and Thomas laughed. Diane's expression darkened. "Margaret, I didn't want to tell you this before, but Rebecca has been saying things around town. At the PTA meeting last month, she told several mothers that you were becoming difficult to manage and showing signs of cognitive decline." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What? I'm perfectly fine. I know that." Diane reached for my hand. "Everyone who knows you knows that. But she's been planting seeds." Linda from the garden club mentioned Rebecca asked for recommendations for memory care facilities for aging parents. The systematic nature of this betrayal was becoming clearer. While smiling to my face, my daughter-in-law had been constructing a narrative around town that I was losing my faculties. But why? After meeting with Diane, I waited until I knew the family would be out, Thomas at work, Rebecca at her spin class, and the children at school. I used my key to enter through the basement door that connected to my apartment. My intention was to gather essential documents and more clothing, but as I passed through the main house, Thomas's tablet chimed with a message notification. Normally, I would never invade someone's privacy, but given the theft from my accounts, I felt justified. The tablet wasn't password protected. The message that had just arrived was from Rebecca. "Mom called from the hotel. She knows something. Delete those transfer records, and I'll call Dr. Martinez about that evaluation we discussed." I scrolled through their previous exchanges and felt physically ill. There were jokes about the basement troll and complaints about the old lady's constant interference. Screenshots of my text messages to Thomas had been shared between them with mocking comments. But most disturbing were their explicit plans. "Once we get power of attorney, we can access the retirement accounts too. At least another $200 Kelvins there. Enough for the lake house down payment and the kitchen remodel." I carefully returned the tablet exactly as I'd found it and continued to my room. There, I discovered more evidence of their duplicity. My medication organizer had been tampered with. The blood pressure pills I took daily didn't look quite right, slightly larger and a different shade of white than usual. I pocketed the suspicious pills for testing. In my bathroom drawer, I found a brochure for Sunny Valley Care Center, a nursing home in the next county, with notes in Rebecca's handwriting about Medicaid spend-down requirements and involuntary commitment procedures. They weren't just waiting for me to leave. They were planning to force me out and take everything I had. When Thomas came home that evening, I cautiously approached him about the missing money. "Mom, what are you talking about?" His tone was patronizing, his smile tight. "There haven't been any unauthorized transfers. You probably forgot making them. You've been pretty forgetful lately. Remember when you couldn't find your glasses and they were on top of your head?" "Thomas, I know what I saw. $15,000 is missing." His expression hardened. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're imagining things. Maybe we should have Dr. Martinez do that evaluation sooner rather than later." I recognized gaslighting when I heard it. My son, my little boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets and cried when he thought he'd hurt my feelings, was now deliberately manipulating me into doubting my own sanity. Rebecca maintained her two-faced behavior. When Thomas was present, she was solicitous, offering me tea and speaking slowly as if to a confused child. When we were alone, the mask slipped. "You should be grateful we haven't put you in a home yet," she hissed while loading the dishwasher after Thomas left for work. "Most people your age with your issues would be in diapers in some facility by now." The following day, I overheard them on the back deck, voices carrying through the slightly open window. "Dr. Martinez said 2 documented instances of confusion or unsafe behavior would be enough," Rebecca said. "Then we can petition for emergency guardianship." "What about the money?" Thomas asked. "Her retirement accounts need both our signatures if we do it that way. Not if we get the power of attorney first. I've already drafted the papers. We just need to catch her on a good day when she's more suggestible." Later that week, I met my grandchildren at the park near their school. I needed to understand if they had been affected by this toxic situation. "Grandma, are you sick?" 7-year-old Lily asked while swinging. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Mommy told us you might have to go away to a special hospital because you're sick in your head." she replied matter-of-factly. She said, "Sometimes you forget things and might get dangerous." 4-year-old Jacob nodded solemnly. "Daddy said you might not remember us someday. Will you forget me, Grandma?" I hugged them both, fighting back tears. "No, my darlings. Grandma is not sick, and I could never, ever forget you." They had poisoned even my relationship with my grandchildren. The depth of this betrayal seemed bottomless. A dark pit that threatened to swallow me whole. I needed allies and a strategy. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. My financial security and autonomy were at stake. Through social media, I located Rebecca's estranged sister, Stephanie Winters. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop 30 miles away to avoid local gossip. Stephanie arrived looking like a more authentic version of Rebecca, similar features but without the carefully maintained facade. "I'm not surprised," she said after I explained my situation. "Rebecca has always targeted vulnerable people with assets." Before Thomas, she dated a widower in his 70s. When his children intervened, she moved on. Her pattern is consistent. But why would Thomas go along with this? I asked, the question that had tormented me for days. Stephanie sighed. Rebecca is incredibly manipulative. She isolates her targets from their support systems, then rewrites the narrative. I'd bet she's been working on Thomas for years, subtly turning him against you while dangling financial incentives. This painful insight aligned with the gradual changes I'd observed in my son. The next step was getting legal protection. My former neighbor, Harold Fisher, a retired attorney, provided invaluable guidance. "Margaret, this is elder abuse, plain and simple," Harold stated firmly after reviewing my evidence. "Financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and attempts to declare you incompetent are serious crimes. But we need more concrete evidence." He connected me with his former colleague, Elizabeth Chen, who specialized in elder law. She advised me to see my regular physician immediately. Dr. Patricia Williams had been my doctor for 15 years. She conducted a thorough cognitive assessment and documented my excellent mental status in detail. "Margaret, there's nothing wrong with your cognitive function," she confirmed. "Your memory, judgment, and problem-solving skills are all excellent for a person of any age. I'm documenting this thoroughly because I'm concerned about what you've told me." She also tested the suspicious pills I'd found in my medication organizer. "These aren't your prescribed medication. They appear to be calcium supplements made to resemble your blood pressure medication. Taking these instead of your actual medication could have caused a dangerous spike in your blood pressure, which could trigger confusion or even a stroke. This was beyond emotional cruelty. They had physically endangered me." Diane's son Michael worked in cybersecurity and provided a small recording device that looked like an ordinary brooch. "It's completely legal to record conversations you're part of," he assured me. "Just wear this when you're speaking with them." Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered damning evidence. I recorded Thomas and Rebecca discussing plans to access my retirement funds. "Once we have power of attorney, we can liquidate the IRA," Thomas said during one recorded conversation. "Mom will be comfortable at Sunny Valley, and we'll finally have enough for the lake house." "As long as we time it right," Rebecca cautioned. "We need those cognitive evaluation results first. Dr. Martinez owes me after all the referrals I've sent him. He'll document whatever we need." My financial advisor, Richard Gonzalez, confirmed the unauthorized transfers and helped me secure my remaining accounts with new passwords and security questions Thomas couldn't guess. We froze my credit reports to prevent any new accounts being opened in my name. "This is unfortunately common," Richard told me. "But you've caught it relatively early. Many elderly clients lose everything before they realize what's happening." I reached out to family members who had grown distant over the past years. My nephew Brian revealed that Thomas had told family members I was experiencing paranoid episodes and should not be taken seriously if I made outlandish claims. "Aunt Margaret, I'm so sorry," Brian said. "We had no idea this was happening. Thomas made it sound like you were suffering from dementia and he was caring for you sacrificially." The most valuable ally came in the form of Janice Porter from the County Elder Services. She helped document the emotional and financial abuse, taking photographs of the nursing home brochures, the tampered medication, and cataloging the recordings. "Your case is textbook elder exploitation," Janice explained. The isolation, gaslighting, financial abuse, and attempts to declare you incompetent, it all follows a pattern we see too often. But you've done an exceptional job gathering evidence. With each ally and piece of evidence, I felt stronger. The profound betrayal still hurt immensely, but now I had a support system and a way forward. For the first time since overhearing those devastating words, finally, she's gone. I began to believe I would survive this ordeal. Despite the evidence I'd gathered, I continued living in my basement apartment, watching and waiting. Attorney Elizabeth Chen advised documenting as many incidents as possible before taking legal action. Meanwhile, Thomas and Rebecca grew increasingly bold, perhaps mistaking my silence for ignorance. The breaking point came during Thomas's 45th birthday. Rebecca organized a lavish backyard barbecue, inviting at least 30 people, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and family members. Despite living in the same house, I received no invitation. I watched from my basement window as guests arrived bearing gifts and food, the patio festooned with balloons and streamers. Around 7 p.m., I decided to make a brief appearance, telling myself that surely my own son wouldn't turn me away from his birthday celebration. I changed into a nice blouse and slacks, applied some lipstick, and climbed the stairs. The party fell awkwardly silent as I emerged onto the patio. Thomas looked startled, then annoyed. Rebecca's smile tightened into a grimace. "Mom," Thomas said stiffly. "We thought you were resting. You mentioned a headache earlier." "A lie. We hadn't spoken in 3 days. I'm feeling much better," I replied pleasantly. "Happy birthday, son." Some guests looked uncomfortable, others curious. I recognized most faces, including several who had been at Thomas's childhood birthday parties I'd lovingly organized over the years. Rebecca quickly pulled me aside, her fingernails digging into my arm. "This is a close friends gathering," she whispered fiercely. "You should have asked before just barging in." I gently removed her hand. "I'm his mother, Rebecca. I lived upstairs when you were still in college." I mingled briefly, noting how many conversations abruptly changed direction when I approached. Eventually, I found myself near a cluster of Rebecca's friends, partially concealed behind a large potted plant. They hadn't noticed my presence. "It must be so difficult having her living there," one woman was saying sympathetically to Rebecca, "especially with her condition." Rebecca sighed dramatically. "You have no idea. She's practically senile now. Last week, she accused us of stealing money from her accounts. Can you imagine? As if we haven't sacrificed enough having her live with us. How much longer do you think?" another friend asked delicately. Rebecca lowered her voice, "But not enough. Between us? The doctor says people in her condition won't last long. A year, maybe 2. Then we'll finally be able to upgrade to a bigger house once her money comes through. We've been so patient." Thomas joined the group, chuckling. "Speaking of upgrades, wait until you see the lakefront property we've been looking at. Just waiting for some investment funds to come through." The casual cruelty left me breathless. They were not only planning to take my money but were actually counting down to my death. I retreated to my apartment, shaking with rage and grief. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying their words over and over. The next morning, I discovered someone had been in my space while I was at the party. My cherished photo album was on the floor near the bookshelf, several pages torn out. The missing photos included my wedding portrait and pictures of Thomas as a baby in my arms. The stress was taking a physical toll. I'd lost 11 pounds in 3 weeks. Insomnia left dark circles under my eyes. My blood pressure, normally well controlled, was dangerously elevated. Dr. Williams expressed concern during my follow-up appointment. "Margaret, your body is responding to extreme stress," she warned. "We need to address this situation before it causes permanent damage to your health." The final straw came 3 days after the birthday party. While using my laptop in the kitchen when everyone was supposedly out, I received an email notification for a local rental listing. The photographs showed my basement apartment, described as a cozy studio with private entrance, available next month. They were advertising my living space while I was still in it. When Thomas and Rebecca returned with the children, I confronted them. "Why is my apartment listed for rent online? I demanded, showing them the listing on my phone. Rebecca glanced at Thomas before responding. We thought you'd be more comfortable in a senior community. We've been researching options for you. Without discussing it with me? And who authorized you to list my space? Mom, Thomas used his patronizing tone. This house belongs to Rebecca and me. You contributed to the mortgage, yes, but you don't own this property. We can rent out spaces as we see fit. I paid $50,000 for the right to live here, I reminded him, my voice rising. That was our agreement. Rebecca stepped closer, her voice sharp. An agreement made before we realized how difficult you'd become, before your mental state started declining. My mental state is perfectly fine, as my doctor has documented. Your doctor is enabling your denial, Rebecca snapped. We've consulted specialists who say your paranoia about us stealing from you is a classic sign of dementia. It's not paranoia when you've actually taken $15,000 from my accounts, I shouted, finally losing my composure. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. You need help, Margaret. Professional help we can't provide. She moved toward me, perhaps intending to guide me toward the basement stairs, but it felt threatening. I stepped backward and raised my hands defensively. Rebecca gave me a sudden, hard shove that sent me stumbling backward. My hip struck the corner of the kitchen island, and I fell to the floor. Lily and Jacob watched from the doorway, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Grandma, Lily cried, rushing toward me. Rebecca grabbed her arm. Stay back. Grandma is having one of her episodes. You pushed me, I said, struggling to stand. Pain radiated through my hip. Thomas helped me up but whispered, If you upset the children like this again, we'll have no choice but to expedite the guardianship process. I looked into my son's eyes, Frank's eyes, and saw nothing of the boy I'd raised. Whatever Rebecca had done to him, whatever weakness or greed she'd exploited, had transformed him into someone I no longer recognized. I need to go to the emergency room, I said quietly. I think something might be broken. Don't be dramatic, Rebecca scoffed. You barely fell. But Thomas, perhaps worried about witnesses, drove me to the hospital. The ER doctor documented my bruised hip and ordered x-rays. When Thomas stepped out to take a call, I quietly informed the nurse about the domestic situation. I was pushed during an argument, I admitted. I don't feel safe returning to that house. The hospital social worker took detailed notes and provided resources for elder abuse victims. The incident report became another piece of evidence in my growing case against my son and his wife, a case I never imagined I'd need to build, but now recognized was necessary for my survival. While recovering from the fall, I realized I could no longer stay in that house. The physical push had crossed a line, and Thomas's threat to expedite the guardianship process made it clear they were preparing to legally strip away my independence. I needed to disappear before they could implement their plans. Diane offered her guest room indefinitely, but I worried that would be the first place they'd look. Instead, she helped me secure a small, furnished apartment in a senior living community 15 miles away. The monthly rent of $1,450 was steep, but I could manage it temporarily with my Social Security payments, now directed to a new bank account. Moving required careful planning. I waited until the family's weekend routine provided the perfect opportunity, Thomas coaching Jacob's Saturday morning soccer games while Rebecca took Lily to dance class. They would be gone for at least 3 hours. Diane arrived with her son Michael and his pickup truck. We worked quickly, taking only essentials: clothing, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and my computer. I left furniture and appliances since the new apartment came furnished. Within 90 minutes, we had emptied my life from the basement that had been my home for 4 years. I left a brief note on the kitchen counter. Thomas and Rebecca, I'm taking some time away to think about our relationship and future arrangements. Please respect my privacy during this period. I will contact you when I'm ready to discuss things further. Mom. I included no contact information or hints about my location. Then I turned off my cell phone, knowing they could potentially track it, and used the new prepaid phone Diane had purchased for me. The reaction was swift and revealing. By that evening, Thomas had called Diane's house 6 times. His messages began with concern, but quickly escalated to anger. "Mom's having a mental health crisis," he claimed in his first message. "We're worried about her safety." By the sixth call, "If she's with you, you're interfering with a family medical situation. We're filing a missing persons report. This is serious, Diane." Rebecca launched a social media campaign, posting a smiling photo of me with the grandchildren and a carefully worded message suggesting I was confused and vulnerable and may not remember where she lives. The calculated nature of their response confirmed I'd made the right decision. The police conducted a wellness check the following day, having been told by Thomas that his cognitively impaired mother had wandered off. The officers seemed relieved to find me perfectly lucid and comfortable in my new apartment. "Ma'am, your son is very concerned about you," one officer said diplomatically. "I'm sure he's concerned about something," I replied, showing them my documented injuries from Rebecca's push. I left voluntarily for my own safety after this incident. They departed with assurances they would inform Thomas I was safe but would not disclose my location without my permission. My attorney, Elizabeth Chen, sent a formal cease and desist letter regarding the financial abuse, demanding full restitution of the stolen funds and warning against further defamatory statements about my mental health. The letter provoked Rebecca into action. She arrived at Diane's house with a bouquet of flowers and tearful apologies. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding," she told Diane. "Margaret has been so confused lately. We're just trying to protect her finances from scammers. Please tell her we miss her and want her to come home." Diane, loyal friend that she is, played along. "I'll pass along the message if I hear from her." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "You know where she is." "This isn't helping her, Diane. She needs professional care we've arranged." "Like the care that left her with a bruised hip?" Diane countered. "I think Margaret is exactly where she needs to be right now." Thomas's approach was more threatening. He left voicemails warning of legal consequences for my rash actions and reminding me that I had nowhere else to go. When these tactics failed, he tried emotional manipulation, using the grandchildren. "Lily and Jacob cry for you every night," he claimed in one message. "How could you abandon them without even saying goodbye?" The guilt was crushing. I hadn't abandoned my grandchildren. I'd fled danger, but they couldn't understand that distinction. I arranged for supervised visits through my attorney, neutral ground where Rebecca and Thomas couldn't interfere. Our first meeting was at a pizza restaurant with Elizabeth present. The children were clearly confused, having been told various stories about my absence. "Daddy said you're sick and needed special doctors," Jacob said, his small face serious. "Mommy told us you got confused and forgot where you live," Lily added. "Are you better now?" I hugged them both. "I'm not sick, sweethearts. Grandma just needed her own place. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but I will always love you and want to see you." Rebecca had clearly attempted to poison even this relationship, telling the children I might act strange or say confusing things during our visit. I noticed Lily watching me carefully, perhaps looking for signs of the craziness her mother had described. During this difficult period, I reconnected with my sister Clara. We had grown distant over the years, and I now realized Rebecca had subtly discouraged our relationship, intercepting Clara's phone calls and forgetting to tell me about them, criticizing my sister within Thomas's hearing until he too began avoiding her. Clara welcomed me with open arms. "I knew something was wrong when you stopped coming to family gatherings," she said. "Rebecca always had some excuse why you couldn't make it, usually related to your health problems I never believed existed." Clara offered her vacation cabin as a temporary refuge if needed, another safe location unknown to Thomas and Rebecca. My circle of support was growing, each person providing practical help and emotional strength when I needed it most. In therapy sessions with Dr. Karen Blackwell, a psychologist specializing in family trauma, I began processing the profound betrayal. "I keep asking myself how I didn't see this coming," I admitted during one session. "Were there signs I missed?" "Manipulative people are skilled at hiding their true intentions," Dr. Blackwell explained. "They isolate their targets gradually, normalize inappropriate behavior, and make you doubt your own perceptions. Your son and daughter-in-law executed a calculated campaign against you. That's not your fault." I also joined a support group for elder abuse survivors, where I heard stories disturbingly similar to mine. Financial exploitation by family members was painfully common, as was the gaslighting about mental competence. "They always go after your sanity first," explained Harriet. a 7-8-year-old former school principal whose nephew had attempted similar tactics. If they can make others question your mental capacity, everything else you say becomes suspect. With distance came clarity. I mourned not just the financial loss and safety of my home, but the son I thought I knew. Thomas had chosen money over morality, greed over compassion, and his wife's manipulation over his mother's well-being. That realization hurt more than anything Rebecca had done. By the 4th week of my disappearance, Thomas and Rebecca escalated dramatically. They filed a formal missing persons report, complete with medical documentation from Dr. Martinez claiming I suffered from moderate dementia with paranoid features and was a danger to myself without supervision. Detective Reyes, assigned to the case, interviewed me at my apartment. I provided my medical records from Dr. Williams, documentation of the financial theft, recordings of their conversations about accessing my retirement accounts, and the hospital report from my injury. Mrs. Peterson, this isn't a missing persons case, Detective Reyes concluded. This appears to be attempted elder fraud. I'm forwarding this information to our financial crimes unit. The police report officially closing the missing persons case noted I was found to be of sound mind and residing independently by choice. This document became another cornerstone in my growing legal case. My attorney filed a civil complaint for financial elder abuse, seeking restitution of the stolen $15,000 plus damages. We also requested a restraining order against Rebecca based on the physical assault. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. Thomas and Rebecca's panic was evident in their escalating tactics. Rebecca made a dramatic show of reconciliation, sending tearful videos pleading for my return. "Margaret, we're so worried about you," she sobbed in one recording. "Whatever misunderstandings have happened, we can work through them as a family." The children missed their grandmother. When the emotional appeals failed, Thomas resorted to threats. "Mom, if you continue with this ridiculous lawsuit, you'll never see Lily and Jacob again," he warned in a voicemail. "Is that what you want? To destroy this family over your confusion about some bank transfers?" I maintained the supervised visitation with my grandchildren, which Rebecca initially tried to sabotage by scheduling competing activities. The family court mediator quickly put a stop to that interference. During one visit, Lily asked a heartbreaking question. "Grandma, did you run away because you don't love us anymore?" "No, sweetheart," I assured her, holding back tears. "Grandma will always love you." Sometimes adults have disagreements that have nothing to do with children. Your mom and dad and I need to work through some grown-up problems. Mom says you're confused about money, Lily continued, clearly repeating what she'd been told. Everyone gets confused sometimes, I answered carefully. But I'm not confused about how much I love you. Rebecca attempted to turn other family members against me. My nephew Brian called to report she had contacted him with concerns about my declining cognitive state and paranoid accusations. Fortunately, Brian had already heard my side and recognized the manipulation. Aunt Margaret, she actually suggested we should consider supporting their petition for guardianship, he told me. Said it would be the compassionate thing to do given your condition. I almost laughed in her face. Other relatives weren't as discerning. My cousin Elaine, always easily influenced, called to express her deep concern about my break from reality. Thomas had apparently told her I was refusing psychiatric treatment and living in delusions of persecution. "Elaine," I said firmly, "I have medical documentation of my mental competence from multiple physicians. What Thomas is doing is called gaslighting. It's an abuse tactic." "Well, I don't know about all that," she replied uncomfortably. "I just think families should stay together and work things out." "I agree completely," I said. Unfortunately, Thomas and Rebecca's idea of working things out involved stealing my money and trying to have me declared incompetent. The most unexpected development came through an anonymous email sent to my attorney. The sender claimed to be a former colleague of Rebecca's at the real estate office where she had worked 3 years earlier. The email detailed a pattern of concerning behavior, including Rebecca's boasts about accessing her mother-in-law's nest egg and finally getting the lake house once the old lady is in a home. More significantly, the tipster suggested we investigate Rebecca's previous employment at Sunshine Senior Living, where she had been dismissed following complaints from family members about missing valuables. This led us to discover Rebecca had a history of financial impropriety, including a sealed record from her early 20s involving credit card fraud. Each new piece of information strengthened my legal position while simultaneously breaking my heart. The calculated nature of their plan, potentially years in the making, was staggering. Rebecca had targeted me from the beginning, and somehow convinced my son to participate in the exploitation of his own mother. During this period, the media became interested in my case. A local newspaper reporter researching elder abuse trends contacted my attorney after hearing about the case from courthouse sources. Elizabeth consulted with me about the inquiry. Going public has pros and cons, she advised. It could pressure them towards settlement and raise awareness about elder abuse, but it also exposes very personal family matters. After careful consideration, I agreed to an anonymous interview, referenced only as a local grandmother in her 60s. The resulting article, The Silent Crisis: Financial Elder Abuse in American Families, detailed the growing problem without specifically identifying my case. Nevertheless, Thomas recognized the situation described. His angry email accused me of airing family business to make yourself look like a victim. The irony of this complaint, after their public social media campaign portraying me as mentally incompetent, was not lost on me. The pressure of public scrutiny and impending court proceedings began showing cracks in Thomas and Rebecca's united front. During a co-parenting meeting regarding grandchild visitation, Thomas arrived alone, looking exhausted. "Rebecca thinks we should just cut all contact," he admitted. "But I don't want the kids to lose their grandmother." For a moment, I glimpsed the son I remembered, the boy who once showed such compassion and moral clarity. But the moment passed quickly. "If you'd just come home and stop these wild accusations, everything could go back to normal," he added, the manipulative pattern reasserting itself. "Normal?" I echoed. "You mean back to stealing from me and planning to put me in a nursing home against my will? That normal?" He flinched but didn't deny it. "It wasn't like that. You're twisting things." "Thomas, I have recordings of you and Rebecca discussing exactly that. There's no twisting needed." The look that crossed his face, a mixture of shock, shame, and calculation, told me he hadn't known about my evidence gathering. Rebecca had obviously kept him in the dark about how much proof I had accumulated. As the court date approached, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about my personal justice anymore. Through my support group, I'd met too many elders who had been similarly victimized but lacked the resources or evidence to fight back. My case could help establish precedents for others to follow. Detective Lopez from the Financial Crimes Unit called to inform me they were considering criminal charges based on the evidence. "Mrs. Peterson, what your son and daughter-in-law attempted is a felony in this state," he explained. "We're still investigating, but the unauthorized transfers alone constitute elder financial abuse under Statute 720.5. The prospect of criminal charges stunned me. Despite everything, I hadn't fully processed that Thomas's actions weren't just morally wrong but potentially criminal. My son, a criminal. The thought was almost unbearable. 2 weeks before our court date, the anonymous tipster contacted my attorney again with information that changed everything. Rebecca had previously worked at Ridgewood Retirement Community under her maiden name, Winters, and had been quietly asked to resign after several residents reported missing jewelry and cash. More significantly, the tipster claimed Rebecca had attempted a similar scheme with her previous boyfriend's elderly father, going so far as to initiate guardianship proceedings before the family intervened. This history of targeting vulnerable seniors established a pattern that transformed our case. Elizabeth tracked down Martin Kendall, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend's father, now living in Arizona. After some initial hesitation, he agreed to provide a sworn statement about his experience. "She was so charming at first," Mr. Kendall recounted in our video call, "always bringing me homemade meals, offering to help with my medications. Then things started disappearing, my late wife's jewelry, cash from my desk. When I confronted her, she told my son I was becoming paranoid and forgetful." His story mirrored mine with chilling similarity, right down to the suggestion of a memory care facility and attempts to access his accounts. Fortunately, his daughter had intervened before Rebecca could do significant damage. This revelation led us to uncover 2 other elderly individuals with similar experiences. Rebecca appeared to have refined her tactics with each attempt, becoming more sophisticated in her approach. I had not been her first target, merely her most successful one to date. Equally troubling was the discovery that Thomas had taken out a second mortgage on the house 6 months earlier, using paperwork with what appeared to be my forged signature as co-owner. The $75,000 loan had been quickly withdrawn and spent on luxury purchases, a boat, expensive jewelry for Rebecca, and a down payment on a lakefront vacation property. When local news caught wind of the expanded investigation, they ran a feature story on elder financial abuse. While it didn't name Thomas and Rebecca specifically, it detailed a case matching ours and included interviews with financial crimes detectives about the rising prevalence of such schemes. The public exposure created unexpected allies. Rebecca's former co-worker, Janet Simmons, contacted my attorney directly after recognizing the circumstances described in the news report. Rebecca bragged about it, Janet revealed during our meeting. She called it her retirement plan, marrying a man with an elderly parent, then gaining control of their assets. She even joked about it at office parties, saying she'd rather inherit than work for a living. Janet provided text messages where Rebecca had outlined elements of her strategy, including the critical step of making everyone think they're losing their mind so nobody believes them. These messages, sent years before I'd moved in with them, proved the premeditated nature of their scheme. As evidence mounted, Thomas seemed to realize the gravity of his situation. He called my attorney requesting a private meeting without Rebecca or legal counsel present. Elizabeth advised against it, but I insisted on hearing what my son had to say. We met at Elizabeth's office, with her present but remaining silent unless legal issues arose. Thomas looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his normally immaculate clothing wrinkled and stained. "Mom," he began, voice cracking, "I need to explain." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the storm of emotions seeing him provoked. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. At first, it was just about borrowing some money to help with the house. The transfers. I was going to pay those back. And the nursing home brochures? The pills switched with supplements? The plan to declare me incompetent?" My voice remained steady. "Were those going to be paid back too?" He stared at his hands. "Rebecca said it was for your own good. That eventually you'd need that level of care anyway. And we'd just be preparing." His justification sounded hollow even to his own ears. I could see it in his expression. "When did you stop seeing me as your mother, Thomas? When did I become just a resource to exploit?" Tears filled his eyes. "I don't know. It happened so gradually. Rebecca kept pointing out times you forgot something or misplaced something. Normal things everyone does, but she made them seem like symptoms. Then there were money problems, and she suggested solutions that seemed reasonable at first, just temporary measures. And when temporary became permanent, when theft became fraud, I told myself it wasn't really stealing because you'd want to help us anyway, that the ends justified the means." He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see it now what we did. What I allowed to happen. Is this realization related to the criminal charges you might be facing?" I couldn't help asking. "Partly," he admitted. "But it's more than that. Rebecca and things are falling apart. She's furious that I'm even talking to you, says I'm betraying her. But I'm starting to see that she's been manipulating me for years." Thomas revealed that once our legal action began, Rebecca had started transferring assets solely into her name, including the boat and vacation property. She'd opened accounts he couldn't access and was making plans that increasingly didn't include him. She told me last week that if I messed this up, she'd take the kids and leave. That I'd lose everything, I think. I think I've been as much a target as you were, just in a different way. Part of me wanted to comfort him. This broken man was still my child, after all. But another part, the part that had been fighting for survival, remained wary. "What exactly do you want, Thomas?" "I want to make this right. I'll pay back everything. With interest. I'll tell the truth about what happened. About Rebecca's plan. I just need some time to figure out how to protect the kids through this." Elizabeth, silent until now, spoke up. Any cooperation would need to be formalized through proper legal channels, and it wouldn't necessarily absolve you of responsibility. Thomas nodded. "I understand. I just wanted Mom to know. I'm sorry. More sorry than I can ever express." After he left, Elizabeth warned me against placing too much faith in this apparent change of heart. People facing serious consequences often show remorse, she cautioned. It doesn't always indicate genuine change. I agreed to proceed cautiously, but Thomas's visit had shifted something in me. Not forgiveness that would require far more than words, but perhaps the first fragile bridge across the chasm his betrayal had created. The next day, Rebecca called my new phone number, which she must have gotten from Thomas. "You think you've won because he's wavering," she hissed, "but you have no idea what I'm capable of. Back off now, or you'll never see those grandchildren again. I'll make sure they forget you ever existed." I recorded the call and added it to our evidence file. 3 days later, Thomas filed for divorce. The family had splintered, not because of my actions as Rebecca had threatened, but because of their own deception finally exposed to light. The courthouse steps seemed impossibly steep that morning. Not physically, I'd regained my strength and then some in the months since fleeing my son's home, but emotionally. Today would formalize the destruction of what remained of my family as I once knew it. Elizabeth Chen met me at the entrance, her calm professionalism steadying my nerves. "Remember, this is about financial restitution, not punishment," she reminded me. "Stay focused on the facts." Inside, Thomas and his attorney waited on one side of the courtroom. Rebecca and her separate counsel sat as far from him as possible, their body language screaming mutual hostility. Neither would look at me directly. Judge Sandra Watkins, a woman about my age with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, reviewed the case file with methodical precision. The courtroom fell silent as she looked up. "Before we proceed, I want to be clear that I find the evidence in this case deeply troubling," Judge Watkins stated. "Elder financial exploitation is not just a civil matter, but potentially criminal. I've reviewed the documentation thoroughly, including recordings, bank statements, medical reports, and witness testimonies." Thomas's attorney, Mark Davidson, requested a brief recess to discuss a potential settlement with his client. The judge granted 30 minutes. In the hallway, Davidson approached with Thomas trailing behind. "Mrs. Peterson, my client wishes to offer full restitution of the $15,000, plus an additional $10,000 for emotional distress in exchange for dropping all claims." Elizabeth responded coolly. "The unauthorized transfers represent only part of our claim. There's also the second mortgage obtained with a forged signature, the physical injury, and the systematic emotional abuse." Thomas finally looked at me directly. "Mom, please. I know I can't fix what happened, but I want to make this right without dragging it through court. For the kids' sake. You should have thought about the kids before stealing from their grandmother and trying to have me declared incompetent," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. We returned to the courtroom without reaching an agreement. Rebecca's attorney tried a different approach, arguing that his client had limited involvement in the financial transactions. Judge Watkins appeared skeptical, pointing to the recorded conversations where Rebecca explicitly discussed accessing my retirement accounts. When Rebecca took the stand, her previous composure crumbled under questioning. She contradicted herself repeatedly, first claiming she had no knowledge of the transfers, then suggesting they were loans I had agreed to but forgotten about, and finally blaming everything on Thomas. "He handled all the finances," she insisted. "I just went along with his decisions." Thomas visibly stiffened at this betrayal, his jaw tightening. The judge's patience thinned. "Miss Winters, your testimony is inconsistent with the evidence presented. The court has recordings of you discussing how to access Mrs. Peterson's retirement accounts after having her declared incompetent. Those were taken out of context." Rebecca snapped, her composure finally shattering. She was declining. Someone needed to protect her assets before she gave everything away to scammers. "So you decided the best protection was taking her money yourselves?" Judge Watkins asked dryly. When Thomas testified, he admitted to the unauthorized transfers but claimed they were intended as temporary borrowing during a financial emergency. He acknowledged forging my signature on the second mortgage documents but insisted Rebecca had been the driving force behind the plan. "She convinced me Mom was showing signs of dementia," he testified, "said we needed to act quickly before she made bad financial decisions. I believed her because it was easier than seeing the truth." The judge was unimpressed with this attempt to shift blame. "Mr. Peterson, regardless of who initiated these actions, you participated in defrauding your mother. Your signature is on these documents, Your voice is on these recordings discussing how to access her retirement funds. After 4 hours of testimony, Judge Watkins ruled decisively in my favor. She ordered full restitution of the $15,000 in unauthorized transfers, plus $25,000 in damages for emotional distress. She also voided the fraudulent second mortgage, holding Thomas solely responsible for that debt, and granted a permanent restraining order against Rebecca. Most significantly, she referred the case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Elder exploitation is not just a family matter, Judge Watkins stated firmly. It is a crime that deserves serious consequences. This court will not treat the financial abuse of vulnerable individuals as mere disagreements over money. As we left the courtroom, Thomas approached despite his attorney's attempts to stop him. "Mom, can we talk?" "Please?" Elizabeth started to intervene, but I held up my hand. 5 minutes. In the conference room with our attorneys present. Inside the small room, Thomas seemed to collapse into himself. "I don't know how to fix this," he said simply. "I've destroyed everything." "Yes, you have," I agreed, feeling no satisfaction in the admission. "You chose money over morality, Thomas. You chose Rebecca's manipulation over your relationship with me." "I know," he whispered. "The divorce will be final soon. I'm getting counseling. I don't expect you to believe me or forgive me, but I want you to know I see what happened now. How I let myself become someone I don't recognize." "What about the children?" I asked, the question that had haunted me throughout this process. "I'm filing for primary custody." Rebecca's instability has become more obvious. The things she's said, the threats she's made, they're documented now. I want you to be part of their lives again, if you're willing. Under whatever conditions you set, his words sounded sincere, but I'd thought that about many things he'd said over the years. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble easily. "I need time, Thomas. I can't make any decisions about our relationship right now." He nodded, accepting this answer without protest. As he turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I failed as your son in every way that matters." The following week, a mediated meeting was arranged to discuss grandchild visitation. Thomas attended alone, Rebecca having refused to participate. The mediator, Dr. Harriet Johnson, facilitated what became the most honest conversation Thomas and I had had in years. "I want to understand how this happened," I told him. "How my son became someone who could do this to his own mother." Thomas struggled to articulate the gradual erosion of his moral boundaries. "It started small, Rebecca suggesting we borrow from your account during a tight month. Then it became easier each time. She kept framing it as protection, saying we were better stewards of your money than you were. I let myself believe it because it justified what we were doing. And the plans to have me declared incompetent? To put me in a nursing home? That was mainly Rebecca. But I didn't stop it," he admitted. "She researched everything, what behaviors constitute cognitive decline, what documentation we'd need. She even made friends with Dr. Martinez, specifically because he had authority to do cognitive evaluations. The calculated nature of their scheme still shocked me. Did you ever stop to think about what you were doing to me? How it would feel to be declared incompetent when you're perfectly sound? To be stripped of your autonomy and dignity?" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I compartmentalized. I told myself it was for your own good, that eventually you'd need that level of care anyway. I didn't let myself think about how it would feel for you. That's the truth. And it's not an excuse. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, painful but necessary. I didn't offer forgiveness that might never come fully, but I did agree to supervised visits with the grandchildren twice monthly. The district attorney decided to pursue criminal charges against Rebecca, but offered Thomas a plea deal in exchange for testimony against her. He accepted, receiving probation and community service rather than jail time. Rebecca faced more serious consequences. 2 counts of elder financial exploitation and 1 count of assault. The investigation had uncovered her previous victims, establishing a pattern of targeting vulnerable seniors. Her case was scheduled for trial the following spring. As the legal proceedings concluded, I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and sorrow. The justice system had acknowledged the wrong done to me and taken steps to address it. But no court ruling could heal the fundamental breach of trust or restore my family to what it once was. The grandchildren remained my greatest concern. Lily and Jacob had witnessed terrible behavior from both parents and struggled to understand the family's fracturing. I arranged for them to see a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma, determined that whatever happened between the adults, these innocent children would have the support they needed. "Grandma, are you still mad at Daddy?" Lily asked during one visit to the park. "I'm sad about choices your daddy made," I answered carefully. "Sometimes people we love make mistakes that hurt us very badly. It doesn't mean we stop loving them, but it changes things." "Mommy says you tried to steal her money," Jacob piped up. "But Daddy says that's not true." "Your daddy is right about that," I told him gently. Sometimes grown-ups say things that aren't true when they're angry or scared. Navigating these conversations required constant vigilance, balancing honesty with age-appropriate explanations. I refused to use the children as pawns or poison them against either parent, despite what had been done to me. Justice had been served in the eyes of the law, but the emotional resolution would take far longer, perhaps a lifetime, to achieve. 1 year after the court ruling, my life had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. The small apartment I'd initially rented as a temporary refuge had given way to a cozy 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet neighborhood. My settlement money, combined with careful budgeting of my retirement funds, secured my financial independence. On a perfect spring Saturday, I hosted a garden party in my new backyard. Diane was there with her husband, along with my sister Clara, former neighbor Harold, attorney Elizabeth, and several friends from my elder support group. Lily and Jacob ran through the sprinkler while Thomas watched from the patio, still keeping a respectful distance during these family gatherings. "You've come so far," Diane commented, sipping lemonade beside me. "Remember when you showed up at my door that night, devastated and not knowing what to do next?" I nodded, watching my grandchildren play. I never imagined I'd be here, hosting parties and feeling whole again. The journey to this place of relative peace had been arduous. The first few months after the court case, I'd struggled with depression and anxiety. Nightmares about being locked in nursing homes or waking to find all my possessions gone plagued my sleep. Trust became a foreign concept. If my own son could betray me so thoroughly, who could I truly rely on? Dr. Blackwell's therapy sessions provided crucial support during this period. "Trauma doesn't just disappear when justice is served," she'd explained. "Your brain and body need time to process what happened and rebuild a sense of safety." Gradually, I developed new routines and relationships. A watercolor class at the community center introduced me to Janet and Philip, retired teachers who became close friends. I joined a walking group that met 3 mornings weekly, strengthening my body while connecting with neighbors. Volunteer work at the library's literacy program gave purpose to my Tuesdays and Thursdays. Rebecca's criminal trial had concluded 3 months earlier with a guilty verdict on all counts. The testimony of her previous victims, combined with the overwhelming evidence in my case, resulted in a 2-year prison sentence. I felt no joy at her incarceration, only relief that her pattern of exploitation had been stopped before she could target other vulnerable seniors. Thomas's journey had been complicated. After completing his community service at a senior center, an assignment deliberately chosen by the judge, he had continued volunteering there. He underwent therapy, both individual and group sessions for family abusers. The divorce finalized, he secured primary custody of the children with Rebecca, limited to supervised visitation upon her release. Our relationship remained a work in progress. I had not fully forgiven him, perhaps I never would completely, but we had established a careful, structured relationship centered primarily around the grandchildren. Today marked the first time I had included him in a social gathering at my new home, a tentative step toward whatever our future relationship might become. "Mom, everything looks beautiful," Thomas said, approaching hesitantly as the children returned to the sprinkler. "You've created something really special here." "Thank you," I replied, neither warm nor cold. "It's taken time." He nodded, understanding the layers in my response. "I've been meeting with a financial counselor. I'm setting up college funds for the kids, trying to rebuild some security for them after everything." "That's good, Thomas. They deserve that stability." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. Finally, he asked, "Do you think we'll ever get past this? Not back to before. I know that's impossible, but to something better than where we are now?" I considered his question carefully. I don't know. Some days I think we might. Other days, the memory of what happened is too raw. But I'm trying. For Lily and Jacob, if nothing else. That's more than I deserve, he acknowledged. Thank you for letting me be here today. Later, as guests departed and twilight settled over the garden, I sat alone on my porch swing, reflecting on the journey. The financial restitution had secured my material needs, but the emotional healing had come through rebuilding a life entirely my own. My new home contained no basement apartment, no sense of being an appendage to someone else's household. Every decision, from the color of the kitchen walls to the flowers in the garden beds, reflected my preferences alone. After decades of compromising, first in marriage, then as a dependent in my son's home, this autonomy felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I had discovered new strengths through adversity. The woman who had stood frozen outside her son's house, hearing him celebrate her absence, would hardly recognize the person I had become, more assertive, more discerning, more complete in myself. Most meaningful was the work I'd begun with the County Elder Services, speaking to senior groups about financial exploitation and family abuse. My case had become something of a template, helping others recognize warning signs I had missed. Once a month, I joined Janice Porter in presenting to community organizations, turning my painful experience into protection for others. If I had known what to look for, I often told these groups, I might have recognized the danger sooner. Isolation from friends and family, unexplained financial transactions, suggestions that you're becoming forgetful when you know you're not. These aren't just unfortunate misunderstandings. They're warning signs. My relationship with my grandchildren had strengthened despite the family turmoil. I established new traditions with them: Sunday afternoon baking sessions, monthly museum adventures, bedtime stories via video chat when they couldn't visit in person. I was determined that despite the fractured relationship with their father, they would never doubt their grandmother's love. "Grandma," Jacob had asked during a recent visit, "are you still sad about what happened?" "Sometimes," I answered truthfully, "but being with you and your sister makes me very happy." "Daddy says he made really bad mistakes," Lily added. "He says he's trying to be a better person now." "I believe he is trying," I told her. "People can change and learn from their mistakes. That's an important lesson for everyone." I had created a special savings account for each grandchild, separate from anything Thomas might provide, ensuring they would have resources for education or other needs as they grew. More importantly, I was documenting family stories, values, and ethical lessons in journals for each of them, a legacy beyond material possessions. As darkness fell on my garden party day, I made a final entry in my personal journal, a practice Dr. Blackwell had suggested for processing emotions and tracking progress. Asterisk. 1 year later, I am not the same person. The pain hasn't disappeared, but it no longer defines me. I've built a life that belongs completely to me, with relationships chosen rather than inherited. I've learned that freedom isn't about being alone, it's about choosing who deserves to be in your life and on what terms. Some days I still grieve for what might have been, but I no longer wish to turn back time. This path, difficult as it's been, has led me to a strength and clarity I might never have discovered otherwise. Asterisk. I closed the journal and looked up at the emerging stars. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it on my own terms, in my own home, with the wisdom hard-won through betrayal and recovery. That knowledge itself was a form of triumph, bittersweet but genuine. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you find strength when you felt most vulnerable? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and recovery. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and create boundaries with toxic family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself if you ever face similar challenges. Until next time, take care of yourself and the elders in your life. They deserve protection and respect.